Not really. I mean, we plan to travel some. Just hopefully just be able to do whatever we want. If we want to get up one morning and drive to Colorado, then we'll get up and drive to Colorado that day. That freedom to be able to just go and do what you want when you want is where it's at to me.
You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their current portfolio allocation. Now to your hosts, Clark Sheffield and Jace Mattinson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode number 264. Man, it has been a wild week in sports between the MLB and football and NFL, college, etc. Man, what a phenomenal week of sports. And, I thought it was interesting. We have a guest on today who has been primarily in the oil and gas industry his whole career. Kind of landed into it, as he puts it, and has stuck with it. We also had a comment this week from our president out in California that, gas prices were, more or less significantly higher in California than anywhere else in the country, so to speak. I don't want to get into the politics of it and everything, but I find it interesting, and that's partly why I thought it'd be interesting to have this guest on this week, is because we actually haven't had as much probably oil and gas representation as maybe I would think, given that there's, especially in my home state, Texas, there's quite a few millionaires I know of for sure in the oil and gas industry, but just in general, it's such a massive industry and it affects, nearly all of us daily. And so as we've seen prices come down significantly, across the country for the most part, and kind of trickled back up, but they've come down from, some of the significant highs that we had, over the course of the summer to a more reasonable level, so to speak, except for in California. And we don't get into that discussion with our guests or anything, but I just thought it was interesting as we look at, as I'm watching football and I'm watching all these sports and all these different demographics and, how California is one state, New York's another, and Florida, Texas, and all these different, Alabama, Tennessee in the mix, and all these states and how their, micro and local economies really do affect us on a personal financial level differently. And that's why, to some degree, I really don't believe there's one size fits all. I mean, personal finance is extremely personal. And I know that's an odd tie to football, but I was watching all these different people in all these different states and how these implications of every little thing plays into, why people live where they do and what they do in those states and, what the taxes are like and all that kind of thing. And then I saw this quote from our president about that California always has high gas prices, which traditionally it does, much higher than other states, but has not come down on the level that the rest of the country has. So at any rate, little interesting tidbit there. This week we have Tyson. Like I mentioned, he's been in the oil and gas industry. He's 51, his net worth of $3 million. He's got a paid-for house valued around $150,000. He's had that paid off for quite some time. He's just under about $500,000 in company stock, and then he has the rest in the market and various retirement accounts and other accounts. So truly a millionaire next door. Last week we had Justin, jack of all trades, so to speak, in a way, and he's made most of his money and made his mark as a voiceover artist. And he had a net worth of $1.9 million. So without any further ado, let's get into the interview with Tyson.
Tyson, do you want to just give us a little about your background or what you're up to now?
Yeah, sure. I'm an operations manager at an oil and gas facility in Houston area. I grew up in East Texas, didn't really have any desire to go into the oil and gas business. It just kind of fell in my lap as a early 20s or mid 20s individual. My wife and I were about to get married, and this opportunity came along, took it, and it's worked out really, really well. Nowadays, I'm married, got two kids, one 20-year-old, one 16-year-old. We live in a small East Texas town, and that's about it.
Awesome. And what is your net worth today?
It's just a little over $3 million.
Congrats. And how is that divided up?
It's about 2.9 million divided up into several retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, between me and my wife. About 450,000 in company stock from the company that I work for, and then we have about 35 or 40,000 in cash that we hold in the bank, and then our paid for house.
Okay, and how much is the house worth?
Roughly about 150.
Oh, okay. And when did you pay that off?
It's been paid off for probably 10 years.
Okay, so a majority of the money that you have invested in the market retirement accounts, is that in index funds, bonds, individual stocks?
No, the only individual stock I own is the company stock that I work for. The rest of it is all in mutual funds. I've stayed away from index funds for the most part. I take the Dave Ramsey approach and try to pick mutual funds with long track records. And there's plenty of them out there that, in my opinion, from what I see on paper and what I've experienced, produce much better returns than the S&P 500.
And what would be an example of like a fund that you're looking at that does better than the S&P 500?
Probably the best performing fund that I own right now is one called ETGLX. It's Eventide Gilead. It's been around about 13 years. I think it's averaged about 17.5% annual rate of return. But I have three others. I can't remember the names of them right this second, but they were all founded in the mid 80s. One was 84, two were 1985. And since that time, they've all three averaged between 15 and 16% rate of return since 1984 and 85.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So when did you start contributing to these retirement accounts? Because it sounds like a lot of this has really been the growth that's come from them if you're getting 15, 16% returns.
Yeah, so I started work for the company that I'm at now in 1995. We were not allowed to start a 401k immediately. We had to wait about 90 days. We were young newlyweds, so we didn't have a lot of disposable income. And so it was several months after that before I started. So probably close to 26 years old when I started funding. I started with about 10% and then just gradually increased it up to the maximum that they would allow us to put in. But back then they gave some pretty simple options that we were open to. I think an 8% return was what they were targeting for the highest aggressive portfolio back then. Shortly thereafter, or late 90s, I went to a Dave Ramsey conference, listened to him, and the stuff just made sense to me as far as the investing side. So as soon as they opened up and started giving us a few more options, I started looking for those stronger, more aggressive mutual funds. And then probably mid 2000s, our company changed the provider, and we were given a lot more options then. We were given probably 25 or 30 different options. Same deal, just went with the most aggressive options that I could come up with. And it's been really, really volatile at times. I kind of hate to admit this. During the pandemic and during the month of March, I lost almost $700,000 in my account. But by mid-June, it was back, and I ended up closing the year up by over $400,000.
Did you touch it at all when it dropped like that?
I did not. I've never touched it. It's had three major drops like that I can remember, and I've never touched it. I just kept funding and kept funding and kept funding.
Were you tempted at all?
I think you're always tempted, but by the time you talk yourself into it, it's almost too late. So I wasn't anywhere close to ready to sell or ready to cash out or ready to retire. So there was really no benefit to me at that point. If I have confidence that the market is going to come back over time, then just keep funding it.
Were you tempted to add a bunch more, maybe not in retirement, but into brokerage or something when it dipped like that?
Yeah, I would have really liked to have had a lot of cash sitting on the sideline at that time, because I would have done that very thing, but I didn't have enough to really make that big of a difference. So I wasn't going to deplete my emergency funds to make that play. So,
Tyson, how old were you when you became a millionaire? You're at 3 million now, give or take. How old were you at the first million?
It was around 45, just a little over 45 years old.
Okay, and you're young 50s now?
51, yes, sir.
Okay. So 6 years, that means you're going another million every 3 years.
Yeah, I had a goal. I wanted to hit 2 million by the age of 50. And in late January of 2020, it actually hit just over 2 million, and then started trickling down just a little bit, and then the whole pandemic hit. But by the end of the year, it was back up to 2.3, 2.4, somewhere close to that range. And my individual IRA, I moved it from, this is one of the mistakes that I made, was not moving it sooner out of the old 401k account with another company into an IRA. So just a hair over 3 years ago, I moved that finally from that old 401k account into a brokerage account. And in 3.5 years, it went from 950,000 to a little over 1.8 million. So it's doubled in just a hair over 3 years.
And that's all in those mutual funds you referred to earlier.
Yes, sir. I have that one in about 5 different funds, I believe.
So I looked up this index fund, or this mutual fund, excuse me. I'm looking at it on Fidelity. So ETGLX, Eventide Gilead Class N. So it started in 2008. Your life annual return is about 17.3%. S&P during the same period is just short of just shy of 12%. So, and it started in 2008. Your heavy tech, heavy hospital, I'm just using this, or healthcare, just using this as an example. What percent, or how much of your net worth, being at 3 million, and most of it here, well, 2/3 of it, right, has come in the last 6 years, which means a bigger chunk has come in the last 12 years. How much of it is due to the market going crazy? And do you worry at all that, hey, the market might slow down, right? I'm in these mutual funds. It's a 17% return now, but what happens when that comes back? Should I take some off the table, or what's your thinking there?
I think often about whether or not it's time, but I can't talk myself into it. I'm hoping that if that were to if we do have a large pullback, I can make a move quick enough to pull some of it back. Because I fund my 401k account as much as I can possibly fund it right now. But that IRA account is not being funded any longer, so it wouldn't do me any good to ride that one back and then try to keep funding into it, because I don't have anything going into it, obviously. But yeah, it's always in the back of my mind that wondering if it's going to take a big hit or not. But so far, so good.
I guess it did, right? You said March of 2020, it did.
Yeah, so I'm really hoping that for the next foreseeable future, 4 or 5 years, that the bear market that we experienced, but we just never know.
Yeah, of course. So you mentioned it just briefly before I asked that last question, the option of switching to the Roth. Talk about that. You mentioned that maybe was one of your mistakes early on. Yeah, so when I first learned about a Roth, probably close to 20 years ago, some friends of ours introduced us to a advisor through Primerica, and he talked us into opening up a Roth IRA, and we did. But the mistake that I made with that was, he told me that once you got to about 35 to 37 years old, the Roth didn't make sense anymore. And I just took his word for it and listened to him. And so I never, a few years later, we got the option at our work to switch our 401k account to a Roth, and I didn't do it because I was listening to this other individual. I really wish now that I had converted that money over, because another probably $600,000 or about $600,000 of this would have all been Roth money on top of the Roth. And now none of it is Roth?
No, I do have some Roth. The 401k account I have currently with my employer now is a Roth account, and then my wife has right at $100,000 or about $90,000 in a Roth account as well. So we have $250,000, $300,000 in Roth. Okay,
gotcha. So do you think about required minimum distributions on your traditional holdings?
Yeah, for sure. This is the advisor that I have now. We've actually been in discussions with talking about when I retire, making some of those Roth conversions as soon as the year after I retire, so that I don't have the income issues with causing the higher tax brackets. But now we're hearing that the new administration may put a stop to those, and
they may not let you do that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out, right? So Tyson, you're a total market person here, right? No real estate, no HSA, 529, no crypto. I mean, you're just market and cash and a little bit in your house, a little bit as a percentage of your net worth, that is.
Yeah, I've thought over the years about getting into rental real estate, but I cannot imagine myself being a landlord. Nothing about that sounds fun. I know there's money to be made. I know it's a good investment, but my personality would not fit. I would end up letting the people live in the house for free before having to kick them out. And that would just never work right. So, yeah, everything else is in the market. It's what I've gotten used to. It's what I somewhat I don't know that I fully understand it, but I understand it enough to do what I'm doing. Like I said earlier, the crypto I stay away from. Had some good friends of mine try to talk me into that, but I just never could make myself pull the trigger on it.
Yeah, talk about that, because earlier before we started recording, you said you just stay away from things you don't understand, and if you don't get it, you're not going to pull the trigger on it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I learned from listening to Dave Ramsey over the years was that's one of the things that he pushes is to stay away from things you don't understand. And I didn't do that one time several years back with options trading. I got into that for a little while, and after a couple of months and $35,000 of cash gone, I decided that wasn't for me either. So I got out of that. Really haven't played with it since. I've had a few opportunities to do it again, and just I'm not a big gambler. I went to Las Vegas a few years ago and never played a game in a casino. So we just went to watch a concert.
So you're 51 years old, net worth of $3 million. You say $5 million is maybe your number, right? Did you ever think you would get to 3, or when did 5 million become that goal? So a couple questions there. Did you ever think you would get to 3? And how did you come to 5 million being your number?
So early on, when I was younger, I thought 2 million was the number. If I could get to 2 million, that would be plenty. I could do what I needed to do. But I expected to get that by 60, 62, somewhere in that range. So when this started looking more and more like I was going to be hitting 3 to 4, just set myself a goal of 5. I figured if I get to 5, that would be plenty. That's for me to pull the trigger to retire on. I had 3 numbers in my head. I figured I could retire at 3 if I wanted to. I really wanted to get to 5, but I would probably be at 4. So you can take that for how you want to, but that's what has always played around in my head. Now, once I do retire, which I'm hoping to do in the next 5 or 6 years, I don't intend to stop investing. I'll continue to invest in mutual funds. I'll pull out what I need each year to live on, and the rest of it will go back in the market. And I'm hoping that if I live to 80, 85, 90 years old, I'm hoping to pass along with roughly 10 million or so in investments.
So 10 million's a goal, and that's what you're wanting to pass on with?
Yes, sir.
And do you plan on leaving that to anyone in particular, or how is that going to end up when you pass on?
Well, I'm sure we'll leave some to the kids. I don't know that we would leave all of it to them. We'll probably set up some sort of foundation or trust to. I really like supporting mission work in Africa. We have a missionary that we're good friends with that we support a lot. I'm interested in getting into drilling water wells in Africa for some of the tribes and stuff out in the remote areas. I would actually like to go do that myself on top of being able to fund stuff like that.
Interesting. Is there an item or anything that you want to spend money on right now or in the near future? I
would like to have a small ranch somewhere, probably maybe in the hill country in Texas. If I don't end up buying some more property around close to where we live, I'd really like to have 200 or 300 acres in the hill country in Texas. I do like to hunt a lot, so that area is prime for that.
About how much would that cost in your mind to buy a ranch like that?
Depending on where I would end up finding it and what it got on it, whether it's just raw land or land with a small house, or they can go anywhere from 600, 800,000 up to $1.5 million. I think probably somewhere in the $1 million, $1.2 million would be the cap of anything that I could possibly afford.
Okay. So, Tyson, it sounds like you're a pretty simple guy. I mean, you probably have enough you could retire today. Is that correct?
I could. I would be leaving a lot of money on the table if I did. That's through with where I work at, just from some of the stuff that we're given. It has to mature over time, and So I have to be there until 55 years old if I want to take full advantage of that.
Is that related to company stock and options or RSUs or something, or what's the detail there?
It's all restricted units, yeah.
Okay. So you're planning on staying on board at least until those all vest?
Yes, that's correct.
And then at that point, will you say, hey, I'm done, I'm hanging it up and moving on?
Yeah, unless we have a huge market drop between now and then, and where it doesn't make sense any longer, then I'm still young enough I can pull off a few more years and still retire at a decent age. But hoping it all works out for the 55, 56 time frame.
How do you quantify what that looks like for you? And I guess it'd be 4 or 5 years from now. In your mind, like how much are you staying on for to cash in at in 5 years?
It would be a few $100,000.
Okay, so stay on for 5 more years, and it's getting a couple extra $100,000 as part of a RSU package, and then move on.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, on top of your salary and bonus structures, the RSUs are on top of that. So those mature over a 4-year period. I'm sorry. And but once you reach the 55 years old, with 30 years of service with the company, then you can claim those all of those RSUs at one time. So you don't have to wait for the 4 years for them to mature.
Okay, gotcha. So at 55, you're going to retire. Do you plan on doing anything special in retirement?
Not really. I mean, we plan to travel some. Hopefully just be able to do whatever we want. If we want to get up one morning and drive to Colorado, then we'll get up and drive to Colorado that day. That freedom to be able to just go and do what you want when you want is where it's at to me.
Mm-hmm. What are you going to do for health insurance as you move into this next phase of life?
Probably start off, we're both pretty healthy, so probably start off with something like a MediShare type program, and later on move into the Medicare options. We should have enough to be able to fund the additional Medicare Part B and all of that. I haven't looked into it really closely yet because I'm still 15 years away from being eligible for it, but that's where we probably will end up.
So Tyson, let me push you on staying at the career. So you say it's a few $100,000 more. You're at $3 million now. I assume pretty soon you'll hit $4 or $5 million. You value the freedom. How come stay on?
I can't make myself give up that little bit of extra money.
I know, I asked because I think it's interesting, right? We ask our millionaires, hey, what's the goal? Or when you get to, but it's hard because I think you say the goal's 3, you say the goal's 5, not you, just in general, right? People say they have a goal, then they reach that point, and then it's, I think it's hard to walk away.
It is. And I mean, at the end of the day, they could fire me tomorrow. So if that were to happen, I would lose whatever I had in that portion of the accounts, and I'd be stuck with what I'm at. So, or looking for another job, and that's not very palatable to me.
Right. You enjoy your work?
I do. Most of the time, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it can be stressful at times. There's a lot of moving parts, and we move a lot of petroleum products across our docks, and it can be a dangerous situation if things aren't handled properly. And got about 100 people that work under me that are all out there moving those barrels and moving those products every day, and they become like family, so you're worried about them all the time.
Yeah. Do your kids know your net worth?
Not specifically. I mean, they have probably a small idea. I doubt that they know. They probably think it's probably closer to 1 or 1.5 million if they had to guess, but I mean, they know we're doing okay, but that's about
it. I just ask because if you're at 3, you have the goal of $5-10 million. How do you keep them? How do you keep them free of a sense of entitlement, especially if they know that at some point they're going to get the money, right? I think that's something our millionaires think about.
Yeah, that's one thing that's kept us from just sitting them down and telling them, look, this is where we're at, and this is what you're going to get in the future. And it's all going to be dependent on how they behave. If they don't behave, they won't get it. So, but they're both good kids, and they both behave pretty well now. So hopefully they'll continue down that path.
Yeah. So when did this? Let's go back to your story here a little bit. We've been hitting on a lot of the personal finance stuff, but your story. When did this all start? I mean, obviously you're primarily in the market, nearly all, but how soon did you start contributing to either your 401k, or how soon did you start investing in retirement accounts? Or not how soon, but how early?
It was around late in my 25th year or early 26th, right after my 26th birthday, somewhere in that range, which would have been early 1996. Probably is when I first started, but I've just kept it steady ever since. I mean, I've never stopped, never cut back on investing. I went up a few times. One time I was up to 22 or 23% of our income going into retirement accounts without a company match. I mean, we had one, but that wasn't calculated into that 22 or 23%. Right now, because of the income level that I'm at now, I'm only at 12%. The company matches another 12, but all of the stock, the RSUs that I get, I don't cash in. I keep those and hold those on for a bridge account from 55 to 60 years old.
And how much were you putting in every year? Were you just maxing out the retirement accounts, or?
Yeah, we were maxing out our 401k and my wife's Roth IRA for a while, and then whenever I worked for a smaller family-owned company up until 2015, and we got bought by a larger company. So when that happened, they gave us some pretty decent bonuses, and it put us above the threshold to be able to fund a Roth account again for a couple of years there. And then so we stayed away from that for the time being, and then we just never have started it back up because we were going to have to go into doing the backdoor Roths, and I just haven't went back that direction. I didn't really feel like I needed to at that point.
Yeah. Did your wife work outside the home?
She did when we got married. She was a school teacher. When we got married, we got married one week, went on our honeymoon. She started her job the next week. I started my new job the next week. So we had quite a little run there for about 3 weeks where we were going crazy. But she taught for almost 6 years. And we started having children, and we actually had a little daughter that we lost at birth, and then after that we had a son.
Sorry to hear.
Thank you. And our first son came home healthy and happy, and she said, "I really would like to stay home with him." And I said, "Well, I would rather have you raise him than a daycare." So she's pretty much stayed home with him ever since, and we started them in public schools, and then in I believe it was my oldest one's 6th grade year, we switched over to a homeschool program, and then we went into a homeschool co-op in Beaumont. So the kids go over there one day a week, and they have regular classrooms just like a public school. They get all of their schoolwork for the week, and then they come home and do the rest of it at home. And it has worked out really, really well for us.
Neat.
We were able to travel and go and do things during the week when nobody else was around. And it worked out really, really well for us. And of course, wife being a school teacher, it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Thanks for sharing. So as your net worth grows and as you get older, what do you value more in life?
Time. Time's something you can never get back. I mean, once it's gone, it's gone. So that's why I really want to pull the trigger as early as possible.
Yeah. So just in closing here, and then we'll get to some rapid fire questions and wrap up. If there are a couple things that you could point to, Tyson, in your journey and say, hey, that's what helped me become a millionaire, what would those be? The
steady investing, paying attention to it. Don't just buy something and sit back on it and never look at it again. I try to look at nowadays, I look at it almost daily, but I look at it research-wise probably at least once a month, once every 2 months. I don't move a whole lot of the funds around because the ones I've found typically produce, but last year I found 2 that weren't. I got rid of those and got into one new one. I don't remember which one that was, but then I broke the rest of the money up into a couple of the other ones that were performing better. The best piece of advice I got, my best friend, me and him were riding back and forth to work one day, and he told me, he said, best thing you can do in your life right now is to start tithing. He said, I cannot explain to you why things, if you're giving 10% of your money to God, how it makes everything else in your life add up better. He said, but it does. And so we were on and off kind of at the time. So we started digging into it and have done it ever since, and just been blessed more than we could ever imagine. Yeah,
let me just give you some credit, because you're probably too humble to say it yourself, but you mentioned before the show, before we started recording, that you tithe or give away 12 to 15% of your income annually.
Yeah, that's what
pretty
we
amazing.
Try to do, and we have more than we need, and yeah, it's if I can give anybody a word of advice, that would be it, the biggest one.
Did you ever have debt, Tyson?
We did when we were young. We had car notes and boat notes and things like that. We've never. There was a few times that we got a little probably too close to the edge on how much we had in debt, but we've peeled that back over the years. And we do have a car note right now. It's something I'm not real excited about, but it's the only bill that we have.
Why not just pay that off?
I don't know. Because I don't want to turn loose of $35,000.
Yeah. Did you go to college?
I went for a short period of time. I ended up getting an associate's degree in drafting. I did drafting work for about a year until this other opportunity came up. I wasn't making any money at all. I was making about $20,000 a year back in 94. Another good friend of mine told me, he said, I just got this job with this great company. He said, you ought to come to go to work for us. Well, I went and talked to them, and they were going to pay me $500 a month more than the other place was going to pay me. When you're only making $20,000 a year, that was a lot of money. And so we talked about it and decided we wanted to do that, and it's been worked out really well for us.
All right, Tyson. Well, appreciate you sharing all this. Let's wrap up with some rapid fire questions. What's the most expensive car you've purchased?
The one we have now, it's a Ford Explorer Limited. It's $42,000.
Okay. What's the most expensive vacation experience that you've paid for?
We went to Florida Keys a couple of times in the last 5 or 6 years on dive vacations. We stayed down there for one time 7 days, one time 10 days. They were probably $10,000 or $12,000 a piece.
Okay. If you had $10,000 right now, you have to spend it. You can't save it. You can't invest it. How are you going to spend that?
I'm going to Africa and going hunting.
Okay. Have you done that yet?
I have. I went 5 years ago, and it was fantastic.
Okay, cool. How old were you again when you reached your first million?
About 45.
45. Okay. And planned age for retirement is 55?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is worth the money to you?
What is worth the money to me? Experiences. I love taking trips. I love experiencing new things. But I can't, once I get something into my system that I really enjoy, I can't get away from that either. So I find myself wanting to go on more and more trips because I want to go back to the place I just went, but I want to go to somewhere new also.
What's not worth the money? What
is not worth the money? Trying to keep up with everybody else. I see people constantly that they've got to be spending money to keep up with the next guy. They've got to be buying a bigger house. They've got to be buying a bigger car. And that stuff just doesn't appeal to me.
What are you doing to make your life happier?
Just trying to enjoy my family.
Okay. Well, Tyson, last words of advice for those that are just starting out or getting started?
Start now. The sooner you can start, the better. Start early, save aggressively, put in as much as you can possibly put in, and look for places to invest outside of traditional accounts. Max out your 401k, max out your IRAs. You still have money left over. Find brokerage accounts to be able to invest in, but to marry the right person. If you don't marry somebody that's on the same page that you are in every aspect of life, you're going to have difficulty, you're going to have trouble, and you're both going to be miserable. If you're a tightwad saver and you're wanting to save money for retirement, and all she wants to do is buy the next $1,500 purse, then you're going to be at each other's throats constantly, and vice versa. If she's the tight one and you're the guy that's got to have a $60,000 truck every other year, then you're just not going to be successful.
What's been the range of your household income through your working life?
So when I was making $20,000 a year before we got married. When my wife got married, she was making 20 also. So together we were making 40. And right now for salary and cash bonus is around 200.
Okay. Awesome. Tyson, last words of advice. Any mistakes that you would caution those to avoid?
Stay out of debt as much as humanly possible. People think that it's not possible, but it is. If you can live within your means and save and invest and just get used to that lifestyle. Don't stretch yourself too thin to where you become miserable. That's it to me.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyson. Net worth of just over $3 million. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Clark Sheffield and Chase Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website at millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.